what'll often happen, as we just said, the question is how do you identify and promote future leaders? This is incredibly important, and it's beyond the day-to-day work of more sales, more clients, um, create more revenue, make decisions which are really easy to make. We can just move on. Really putting this in a container and giving it some space um, is what it needs. And you can sit down and ask this question properly. How do we identify and promote future leaders? Leadership's becoming more and more important. You see it everywhere. It's becoming harder. Less people are wanting to do it. It really does require the attention. And what often happens, coming back to what I experienced with that particular company early on, is people just have a feeling. They feel deeply about it. What made me successful is going to make this person successful. It's a quick way to make a decision, essentially. And it's easier. I can get back on with what's important. And you double that up, it's driven by subconscious bias in someone or a group of people. And yeah, when you get groups, they can become influenced and dictated by a certain strong type of leader who can convince them of their way, essentially. So that's a problem that I often see. And what's happening is they've got this intent for succession planning, but is driven by subconsciousness. That's what drives the decision making without a structure, without an approach. That doesn't have to be a complex approach either. Just has to have some sort of framework to it, which can catch some of these problems that might end up downstream. And so, what results are you really going to get if you continue to live in that minimal sort of attention span to succession planning, but somewhat dealing with it approach? That's the big question mark, and that is the problem that could present itself. So, leaning on that further, typically in the SME market, and this can actually go definitely into the medium-sized market. I'm working with a client now; it's got 600 staff, and I've seen this come up. And Brenda Bent's really well-regarded, globally regarded as a coach, wrote this book, Would You Want to Work for You? And that question is a good one because people doing succession probably need to think more broadly than that. That also points to their own leadership development, but it comes up in succession and it leads to more questions. And if they're not considered, you get a poor succession planning approach. First one is, are you choosing yourself? Like really double checking on that. And does it call for that? No, but often it doesn't. The context is completely different. What criteria are you using with intention? I say this time and again, often there's not a lot of criteria. It's a bit of a Hail Mary, and some concepts are often discussed, but not with any rigor or recording or measurement. What evidence are you using to make the decision? Again, this can be confirmation bias driven. What's important evidence? What's not important evidence? What's contextual? None of those questions that often won't come into it. Um, the more mature the enterprise, yes, that can start to happen. What qualities have you actually defined as important to effectively leading people in your organization? That effectively is a big word, and I'm going to touch on that in a minute, which has come out of research recently. And you know, are you promoting someone that is more aligned to you, or are you actually looking at succession that's going to be effective for the organization? Those two things can get mixed up. Have you tested any future leaders? Um, or are you hoping that they're going to work out? There's an opportunity in succession planning and succession preparation to test leaders, and we're going to touch on that as well. What strengths do they bring to create genuine followers? What development areas will derail their effectiveness? All of these questions, if you're starting to ask these questions in planning stage, it's going to help you become somewhat more successful. Obviously, it's not a perfect science. And finally, is confidence overriding competence here? And you're about to see through this research stage what can often happen. And I'll be interested to see if you relate to this or you've seen it. And if you don't do these, ask these questions and start building, a solid approach to succession, these are some of the things that are going to start to come out of the woodwork. You're going to have teams become uncertain. Why is this person our leader? This hasn't really been thought about well or clearly. We're unsure. A different group of people than who made the decision. You're going to have high performers potentially who are getting confused. It's not liking the style, um, not liking their decision-making process, not really listening. There's no autonomy. And eventually you're going to get people to leave if you don't put some thought into who's next on this leadership journey. Stress will go up naturally. Once you start having confusion and uncertainty, yeah, stress is just natural nature that's going to go up. Once you start losing top performers, other people are going to question that. Stress will go up. And you've moved from having a group of people who are cognitively really going quite well, gone through change in a poor succession planning process, and inherited someone who's actually disrupting their day, disrupting their week, how they process things. So now you've got two things you're dealing with. One, getting on with the business, getting results, competition, clients, and then you've got the internal. And it will eventually hit here, hit the bottom line. And have absolutely seen that happen, and I'm seeing it happen right now in organizations. So I mentioned the research. I think it's definitely useful to point on this because this is this year. And Hogan are enormous. If you're not aware of Hogan, they're probably one of the largest assessment companies in the world for personality and leadership testing. And they've found there's a big divide between who is actually leading and who should lead. And yeah, it's interesting reading, and I have a felt sense of this with people in a very small sample who I work with. But what they had, this zero overlap there over to that side, they have a list of what gets people promoted and what employees, the cohort, are looking for to be effective leaders. And they had groups, people who are promoting, measure both, and they had employees measure both. There was zero overlap between these measurements. So the top five executive competencies that were used to promote people and the top five employee desired traits of a leader, none of them overlapped. So there is a gap in thinking when people go to do this type of, whether it be succession or external hiring, etc. Nearly 50% of leaders fail to meet objectives in a new role. And that's coming from not the employee cohort and that's coming from the people who made the decisions. On the employee side, 60 up to 60%, 59 said arrogance and entitlement undermines leadership effectiveness, which I'll show you in a moment why that may be the case. And then obviously 98% of workers cite communication number one, critical leadership attribute. That's really a no-brainer. You would be thinking that that's going to be on both lists. It's not. And just a few more details from that research. 96% say integrity, accountability, and decision making are essential. That's from the employee cohort. Also from that, people who are going to be led, 72% say emotional volatility undermines leadership. And it's sort of coming back into here. And these are then triggering this 46%. Um, so what are they looking at? So Hogan had um, they described what gets people promoted as emergent leadership and who does a good job as effective leadership. It's fairly descriptive from the effective side of things. But emergent is how we tend to look at leadership. It's people who climb the corporate ladder. They've got charisma, confidence, they're self-assured. They'll often compete with peers. They're ambitious, and that translates to that. They can be outwardly, publicly presenting um, that charisma. They improve their visibility. They will take decisions and take initiative, I should say, make decisions, take initiative, which is obviously a great characteristic. Um, yeah, they may be intellectually strong, driving innovation, but they're very good at managing up and they're very good at building alliances. And we're probably sitting here thinking, yeah, I've actually probably seen a few of these leaders in my past who are really good at that. And yeah, but does it mean they're going to be effective? That's a whole different ballgame. Um, are they actually building trust? Are they consistent in their actions? Uh, do they really foster teamwork and belonging? Are we on the same page? Is it really clear and transparent, the communication? Are they holding people to account? That's a big one for keeping high performance. It's the most common thing that I would find comes up. And they really look at the data. They look at evidence and they build effective teams. So have a think about what you've experienced when it comes to leaders you may have had, or what are the type of leaders that are vying for positions right now? What camp do they fall in? And again, from that research to round this off, what gets leaders promoted? Uh, it falls back into the visual things mostly that we see, inspiring others. They're good at competing with peers. They get visibility through results. It's performative, is probably a word I would use. They're quite public. You will think that they're quite a good leader from the outside, but are they actually a good leader? Are they effective? You've really got to look at it from a different lens if that's the case. Whereas looking at the real basics, communication, integrity is huge for galvanizing a team. Accountability, they hold people to account. Have they got a really strong structure in how they approach things on the effective side of things? And often this subconscious bias, which I've said this a few times, and an old way of looking at leadership comes back into this category. Whereas if you have a structure and a plan to look at succession and who gets promoted into leadership, most people I ask this question will say, well, we actually want effective leaders. Great. Let's look at effective leadership and how you're going to think about that. So we're going to look at three different ways of looking at this, three different tools that can be all applied in this succession process. It's what I call a mud map. It's really just an intuitive way of considering different aspects of people for succession and to consider it in real time. Um, then we look at, well, if we've identified some people, how do we want to test them? What can we do? And we get really intentional about what are the tests that we would apply. And then finally, we're going to have a look at another layer that you can add to this is what are the potential followers or even existing followers? What are they saying about their leadership qualities beyond what you think they have? And it just uncovers more data. It's just more information. So before I jump into that, I often have these 3 points come up from clients. This first one is it never feels urgent enough to prioritize. Um, I would change that, and I often do with clients. Would you say to yourself, it never feels important enough to prioritize? And they will always say, yeah, it's always important. So they just let things get in the way. But you don't need to apply rocket science for this. You don't need to apply hours and hours of data and steps to take through this. You just really need to start at the end of the day and just do it. It will free up a lot of cognitive space. People make it into something bigger than it actually is. It's not complicated. We can actually only go so far, really. We're humans, we're imperfect, we're not going to make all the right decisions. But structure and an approach which will at least give us a direction and start thinking about, well, what's going to be effective? Who's an effective leader versus falling into this trap of, well, who looks like a good leader? Um, it really helps to clarify that. And then the third one is, and this comes back again to a feeling, certainty from a very charismatic, confident person. Well, we already know the high potentials, probably high potentials from sales. That's a big one. The lead salesperson going into a leadership role in sales, it can become a disaster if they do not have the right attributes or the right approach, because you're going to lose your revenue team if they don't. Um, and right across the board, CEOs and MDs, they look good on the surface, they sound confident, have got a good background, history, that's their technical base. Are they actually going to be a good leader? Have you asked yourself that question? Are you checking and double checking that as time goes? And that can really set companies back if it's not been examined. So let's have a quick look at this mud map tool. And the problem associated with not using some sort of structure. It's quite simple, this. The problem again is if you're not using something like this, you're just deviating back to what you think may be right. And you've got to sort all that out amongst all the other things that you're doing. So this gives you a way of just going, let's drop all that. I'm going to look at this through a different lens. You're actually getting some data, really common, even into the organization I'm working with now. It's got 600 staff, not getting data. It is intuitive, completely intuitive. And it's hard to get right. And you're going to end up probably getting 2 out of 3 wrong in this, which today, in the world we live in right now, that's not ideal. We've got to make every decision. We need to slow down a little bit and try and make every decision a bit more considered. Because you're going to get uncertainty, you're going to disrupt the team. People do have more choice than ever now in the career market. Not just by companies, but by what career they want to choose and how they want to shift. Do they want to go into their own business? The internet's just created a whole new environment. And the big one is if you don't use a structure like this and you get it wrong, you're the person, the MD, that's going to have to manage that person. And that really becomes a headache. You've just added on a layer of work for yourself that you just didn't see coming, you didn't want. I'm working with a client right now who has someone like this, and they just actually don't know what to do. So, yeah, we're going through a process. So the first thing I look at in this mud map tool, look at 3 things. The first thing is the will to lead. What's the desire for that person to be a leader? Do they want to help people develop, and do they want to be an effective leader? They have this heartfelt sense for leading people, or is it all ambition, pay rise, status, and now we're talking about an emergent leader? They actually don't really care about the people. Is a big question that probably needs to be examined. And if it's not examined, you could end up adding fuel to a fire that you already have. Then we look at their capacity to lead. Structural capacity points to, right, are they working on a project which is for the next 6 months? We really want to consider this person. but they have such a strong technical base and knowledge base in a special project. We can't move them. We can't consider them. So that's just one example. You think about those things. You might have someone that's coming back from maternity leave, and you actually then you put them in the mix and go, well, you've got qualities absolutely that we want, and knowledge base. We'll just consider that, and we can manage how we go about that. And a big one is mental capacity. It's one thing to be technically good. It's a whole new world to be a leader and also good technically. A lot of people struggle with it. My view on leadership uh, is leadership's a new career, and you're just bringing your technical base along. It's bolting on. A lot of people think, well, no, it's a technical base and we'll bolt on leadership. I just have a slightly different view of that. So do they have the cognitive bandwidth to be able to do it? Do they have the emotional intelligence, etc.? And then capability. So we've got will, we've got capacity, and we've got capability. So WCC is the way we look at this. And so do they have the technical capability? It's still very important. Um, I'm seeing an issue with a client right now, got all the personal attributes, struggling technically, and it's causing a problem. So yeah, it's still very important. Do they have a commercial sense for some of these roles in terms of their capability, or are they completely deer in the headlights? It's also important because you're going to be dealing with clients on more complex conversations. How's it positioning the company becomes more strategic, etc. Do they have the capability to create followers and achieve objectives? Or again, are you in an emergent leadership space? Yeah, this person carries a fairly healthy ego, might be the observation as you go through this. Are they actually liked? They're respected. They're not necessarily liked. They're respected for their sales. And then there's this self-leadership component. Are they working on themselves? Do they take their career seriously? Do they take leadership seriously? Um, one thing that you could look at that comes up in this space is they're really good at their job, got a lot of potential, very likable, could be considered, but they're out on the grog 2 nights a week and they're not really looking after themselves. And this business is too critical to have someone who may not shift. So that's a question that might come up as an example. So with clients I work with, I use a tool which helps them intuitively as part of a very, sort of 2.5 hour process, start to look at these things that we've discussed, the will, their desire to do something, their ambition, etc. And we start to put it all together. Is structurally, are they in the right place? Mentally, do they have the capacity to do this? And this is intuitive, it's not really rocket science, but it starts to give you that structure and take you away from subconscious bias. And subconscious bias is often discussed in this conversation. The technical base, obviously, and then there's this commercial maturity, who has it, who doesn't, or who's showing that they may have it. Leadership, do they actually have the capability to develop followers, the emotional intelligence, etc. And what's their sense of self-leadership? And where there are stars against those things, mental leadership and self leadership, they all point to effective leadership. The attributes for effective leadership, which we discussed, between emergent and effective. And so we're really not losing sight of that when we go through this process. And we get a sense of that, and then we can consider people we might take through. I'll just duck back for a sec. We might consider people we take through to the next stage based off this conversation. And clients or people who are considering this can then have a system where we go, okay, well, let's choose. I think we've settled on who we want to test out here and we want to take forward, which then brings us into this pressure testing phase of how we go about succession planning and succession preparation, because it's often not done. We sort of, again, we hope, oh, we'll put someone in the role, particularly if we haven't gone through a structured process like we just discussed. We're putting someone in the role. We're not really pressure testing them, we're just hoping for the best. But there is an opportunity to actually use a stage like this to prepare people. We're sort of moving into the preparation stage rather than the planning stage now. And the problem is if you don't do it, there's complexities with leadership that you really want to see they can handle. Can they actually do this beyond their role? Um, how are people taking to them? Is this actually working? Was our intuition correct? And if we don't pressure test these things, again, we're going to come into uncertainty. People get confused. What are we doing? People start leaving. We have these same things pop up, and it can affect the bottom line. Not only through people leaving, but commercial decisions or objectives that they're not actually hitting or not managing well. And so the analogy I look at here or like to lean on is the All Blacks. They were considered the best team between 2009 and 2019 in the world for 10 years. They won the 2011 and the 2015 World Cups. But before that, they were what we call choking quite a bit, and they had a really poor record at different stages of World Cups. And Gilbert Anoka, who was their mental fitness coach or consultant, came in, and in his early days, he noticed something that the All Blacks were not doing, and they were training without intent for scenarios they might come across. So they weren't really mentally prepared. They weren't pressure testing themselves in training, in practice. And in some of the other work I do, practice is a really big concept to try and help leaders develop. And so he introduced that to the All Black training, and he called it walking towards the flame. And they had scenarios that he would just pop up, including sessions which they didn't see coming at all. And they would reflect on how would you handle that, and they'd just get better and better at it. And all these things came together for them. And it's a similar concept which can be used when you're going through a succession planning and a succession preparation process. And so if you look here, you'll see, for example, John came out of that list of three in the mud map. They take these scores through here, and then they discuss, or we can discuss, okay, let's have John look after two teams, not just his one team, and we'll do it for 2 months. And let's see how he handles 10 people, not three. Let's see how the people take to him. Because if you look at that bottom note there, he's very good with his small team, though he does lack a bit of consistency in leadership with them. So he won't always hold people to account, for example. You want to pressure test that, how he handles stepping up into a larger group, by way of example. Jane, as another example, she might shadow Clive, VP of Sales, and it may be, okay, let's put Jane in a position where there's really a strategic account management opportunity. This is our biggest client, and get her exposed to handling what will be strategic decisions from a client perspective. And you're really testing out how she handles more complex client interaction. So it's not just always leading people, it can be leading client as well in this process. So that is the concept of pressure testing in succession planning and succession preparation. And then this final piece of the puzzle can come during this process, or it can come after, it can come before. It's variable where you want to use it, but it's still part of this process. And a stakeholder is the people that will know that person best because they've experienced them. Often we think the CEO or the person might be, chief HR officer, whatever it is, who may be involved in these conversations and central to decision making, think, well, they know this person best. They probably don't. They've just seen the results land on the table. Um, they've heard things really common. Such and such has told me great things about you. It's really common to hear that. And the problem with that is you're actually not getting complete information. You're not really getting the full picture. And the full picture comes from the people who have experienced them. And again, comes back to this, let's make a quick decision versus let's actually validate that. Let's find out what's going on. Um, what can't the MD see? What can't other people in that room see? What can't the person who's been considered in succession planning, what can't they see? And so we pick up the blind spots that come out of people who may um, be considered for succession. And we do this for a certain process. But blind spots, people can be, in this case, they're either in this example here with that side mirror, they're aware of them, but they just don't always see them. They forget about them. And the classic example of that is you can see where cars are in the background, but as soon as it comes up to your side, you lose sight of it. Um, and that blind spot will stick around. You just want to know about that in this succession process. Or there's scenarios where these people just are not aware what they're like at all. And a classic example is the brilliant jerk who thinks, and they're confident, they've got a lot of charisma, they look like they're going to be a great leader, but they just can't see how they um, relate to other people. And so the best people to do that are stakeholders. Stakeholders are the ones that are really going to look for those attributes, coming right back to that research. Who's an effective leader? So, so we really looked at three elements, I guess, of succession planning and preparation there. And I guess I'd stop now. And if anyone would like to pop up their experience of, what's a win out of this? What have you taken away? What have you learned? What would you work on in your business and why? I'd love to hear it, like what your experience has been. So yeah, open up mute or open up your mic if you'd like to contribute. If not, just all good. No questions. You might just be
No
sorry.
questions from me, but I just think it's one of the key difficulties I have is talking about that unconscious bias piece and how do I remove that objectivity without actually having to have the conversation. And I like obviously you have had the conversation around unconscious bias, but some people refuse to believe that they have unconscious bias. So having a
Mm.
framework that sort of takes that out and creates that I don't know, more structure around it is a helpful tool.
Yeah, and it doesn't. Yeah, as I said, it doesn't have to be rocket science. It's structure. I think ebony's the word. What I actually find in my experience and observed is people that are responsible for the decisions become relieved. They grapple with these decisions. It's important for them. They want to make them correctly because it has consequences. And when they see a structure, they relax actually and go, oh, let's spend some time looking at it through a certain lens. And then one thing leads to another. And um, that tends to unlock that subconscious bias that is living in there. And you can openly talk about that implication as well. So yeah, great. Would you change, Ebony, just out of interest? What would you change in a succession planning process? What's one small thing you'd like to change? Is it that, for example?
Oh, good question. I think it would be good to have some more preemptive conversations around having more rigor around it, because I think it's all about organizational maturity and leadership maturity within your business to begin with, right? And I think I've just moved into FMCG after a long time in a totally different industry, and it's very much around, well, have they worked in FMCG before, and do they do things the same way as me? And are they the best person at their subject matter expertise? That doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be the best leader. And I'm seeing that in our leadership at the moment, that they are great SMEs at what they do, but leadership capability is significantly lacking.
Yeah. And I think there's a generational piece in that too, which I don't know if you've seen, I've seen written about more and more, um, is the values of what's a great leader versus what it used to be. People, younger people, they really want to experience good leadership, and I find they won't stick with it if they're not not experiencing it really. Um, their mind is just going to start getting preoccupied. If you've got a really strong emergent leader who doesn't see their blind spots, doesn't really care about effectiveness, it's sort of managing up, etc. So the experience becomes suboptimal downwards. I see those people leave pretty quickly now, whereas it used to be a job for life and so forth.
Mm.
It's sort of different. It's changed quite a bit on that front. So yeah, it'd be interesting to see in your experience with this new organisation how they would take to, just having a bit more rigor around it and a structure and seeing if it shifts anyone in there. Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. We'll put it to the
yeah,
test.
yeah, yeah. I guess from anyone else, if anyone else got a experience or something that they've had. I've seen this at the MD level, by the way, too, before we move on, where there was poor, and that was uh, could be external choosing as well as succession, where this poor rigor wasn't applied and it just didn't come out well at all eventually. And sometimes that can run for years as well. So from my perspective, just a little bit of context, we've just spoken about this piece down here and an approach to it, which we're really trying to build our leadership capacity, get some depth around it. But I also enter working with clients at this space here, which is okay, we found someone we want to develop. We've done some pressure testing, for example. That's rarely happens in my experience, but it may just be we want to promote them. But we will put some time in down here. So we really get very, very clear what's the one thing that they need to work on to become an effective leader. Not technical, not commercial, etc., but become effective for those people. And then I'll work with those leaders to develop that capability. But I'm not the coach. I apply what's called stakeholder-centered coaching. So I'm more a facilitator, a bit more like a personal trainer, hold them accountable, and so on. So it's the most effective way I've found to get actual impact and change. And so if there's anyone here that is ready for the next step, it might be on your mind, you're not quite sure how to approach it, and you just want to have a conversation, absolutely, and a contextual conversation, obviously. Jump on the phone for 45 minutes. We can look at it in more detail. I also have a succession readiness approach, which I've gone in and helped clients with, which again, it's not really in depth. It's 2.5 to 3 hours of time, which provides this structure. And I've found clients just can walk away at the very least with, okay, I've got a bit of direction now. I think I know the things I need to think about and consider. And then I also come in with people who are already made up their mind, but they really want to understand, oh, have we got this right with the people they're about to lead or they have led? What are the things we're missing? What are the blind spots that we need to work on to make sure it works? And then I'll come in at that stage as well. And this is purely for context, a succession readiness plan to take away that all those problems we've spoken about. It's going to cost me time if I get these assumptions wrong. It's going to cost me money. It's potentially going to cost me talent. My business is going to potentially become quite inefficient for different reasons. That can all cost you a lot more in respect of, a 3 hour session with a report, which, starts around $2,500. So that's more from a contextual perspective. And if you'd like to have a further conversation, here are my details. Keep my email, keep my phone number, give me a call, drop a text, look at the website, or just book a call in, either way. And that QR code takes you straight there.